From the art of Africa to your screen, this is Raw Tales Africa, where every story cuts deep. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on post notifications because it will mean the whole world to me. Now let's get right into the story. Brace yourself. The conference room was electric with tension. Three young men in designer suits sat across from an elderly fisherman in worn khakis and a faded polo shirt. The contrast was striking. Polished Italian leather shoes versus weathered sandals. Gold watches versus sun-spotted hands. Confidence versus quiet dignity. Listen, old man. Marcus leaned forward, his voice dripping with condescension. Your fishing methods are from the Stone Age. You are using nets when we have sonar technology. You are catching fish when we are building empires. Beside him, David laughed cruelly. My grandfather probably used the same methods you are using now, and he died poor. Just like you will die poor. The third man, Samuel, shook his head in mock pity. We're trying to do you a favor here. Sell us your little fishing spots for whatever we offer, because in 6 months, you'll be begging us to take them off your hands. The old fisherman sat quietly, his weathered hands folded on the table. His name was Chief Obinna Okafor, though these young men knew him only as the old fisherman by the harbor. His eyes, deep with decades of experience, watched with an expression they couldn't quite read. You have nothing to say? Marcus pressed. No defense of your primitive methods? Chief Obinna smiled softly. Young man, I've been fishing these waters for 40 years. I've seen storms that would terrify you, and I've seen calm that will bore you. But most importantly, I've learned that the loudest voices often hide emptiest vessels. The three men erupted in laughter. Did you hear that? David slapped the table. Empty vessels, the irony. Stick to your fishing nets, old man, Samuel added. Leave business to those who understand it. But what these arrogant young entrepreneurs didn't know, what they couldn't have imagined in their wildest dreams, was that they were sitting across from the owner of the largest seafood export businesses in West Africa. They were mocking a man whose monthly revenue exceeded their annual salaries combined. They were laughing at a millionaire who had built his empire one fish at a time, one relationship at a time, one wise decision at a time. This is the story of how wisdom disguised as simplicity, humbled arrogance disguised as success. But to understand how we got here, we need to go back 3 months earlier, to the day when 3 young men arrived at the small coastal town of Akwete, believing they could conquer the world. The black Range Rover pulled up to the small fishing village of Akwete like a spaceship landing in a cornfield. The engine's purr was foreign to the ears of children who had never seen anything more expensive than a motorcycle. Fishermen mending their nets looked up in curiosity as 3 young men stepped out, their designer clothes and confident swagger immediately marking them as outsiders. Marcus Okonkwo was the first to emerge. At 28, he wore success like a tailored suit, expensive, perfectly fitted and designed to impress. His father owned a chain of electronic stores in Lagos, and Marcus had parlayed that connection into a modest tech startup. He checked his Rolex, squinted at the humble village, and smiled with the satisfaction of a predator spotting prey. David Adebayo followed, his university degree in business administration hanging around his neck like an invisible medal. He had worked for 2 years at a multinational corporation before quitting to start his own consulting firm, which mostly consisted of him advising small businesses on how to scale up their operations. His confidence was built on theoretical knowledge and untested assumptions. Samuel Igwe was the youngest at 25, but he compensated for his lack of experience with an abundance of arrogance. His family had money from real estate and he had convinced himself that this made him a business genius. He wore his wealth like armor, believing it made him invisible. "Gentlemen," Marcus announced, breathing in the salty air with theoretical satisfaction, "welcome to our gold mine." The village of Akwete was exactly what they had expected: small, traditional, seemingly untouched by modern business practices. Wooden fishing boats light up the shore, their bright colors faded by sun and salt. Fishermen worked with the same methods their fathers and grandfathers had used. To the three young entrepreneurs, it looked like a place frozen in time, ripe for disruption. Their research had been thorough, or so they believed. Akwete was one of the most productive fishing communities on the coast, but it lacked modern infrastructure. Fishermen sold their catch to local markets or small-scale traders. There was no large-scale commercial operation, no export business, no technological innovation. It was, in their minds, a perfect opportunity. "Look at this place," David said, his voice carrying the enthusiasm of a man who believed he had discovered America. "They are sitting on a fortune and don't even know it." Samuel nodded, already calculating profits. "We set up a processing plant, introduced modern fishing techniques, established export channels to Europe and Africa. Within 2 years, we'll be millionaires." What they hadn't counted on was the community's attachment to their traditional ways. What they hadn't researched was the complex web of relationships that governed the fishing industry. And what they certainly hadn't expected was the quiet man who would become their greatest obstacle. Chief Obinna Okafor was 62 years old, though the sun and the sea had aged him beyond his years. His hands were callous from 4 decades of handling nets and ropes. His face was weathered like driftwood, marked by countless days under the African sun. He moved with the deliberate pace of a man who had learned that speed was less important than precision. To the casual observer, he was just another fisherman. He woke before dawn, prepared his nets, and sailed out in his modest boat. He returned in the evening with his cash, sold what he needed to sell, and went home to his simple house at the edge of the village. His clothes were clean but worn. His truck was old but reliable, and his demeanor was humble but dignified. The three entrepreneurs first encountered him on their second day in Akwete. They had spent the money at the local government office, making inquiries about land acquisition and business permits. They had visited the harbor, taking photos and making notes about infrastructure needs. They had eaten lunch at the village's only restaurant, a modest establishment run by Mama Kemi, who served fresh fish and rice with a smile that would warm the coldest heart. It was there, as they discussed their plans over bottles of Coca-Cola, that they first saw Chief Obinna. He entered quietly, exchanged greetings with Mama Kemi in Igbo, and sat at a corner table with his own bottle of Coke and a plate of rice. "Excuse me," Marcus called out, his voice carrying the authority of someone accustomed to being heard. "You're a fisherman, right?" Obinna looked up, his eyes meeting Marcus's with quiet attention. "Yes, I fish." "Perfect. We are investors from Lagos. We are here to modernize the fishing industry in Akwete. Bring it into the 21st century, you know." David leaned forward eagerly. "We are talking about real change, modern boats, advanced equipment, direct export to international markets. Everyone here could benefit. Chief Obinna nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. And what do you know about fishing? The question caught them off guard. Samuel laughed as if the old man had asked something amusing. We don't need to know about fishing. We know about business. We know about markets, about efficiency, about profit maximization. I see, Chief Obinna said simply. And you believe this is enough? Marcus felt a flicker of irritation. Look, no offense, but you've been doing the same thing for probably 30 years, right? Same methods, same results. Don't you want more? I want many things, Chief Obinna replied, his voice carrying a weight that suggested depth this young man couldn't fathom. But I've learned that wanting and needing are different things. I've learned that new isn't always better. David scoffed. That is exactly the kind of thinking that keeps places like this from developing. You are stuck in the past, old man. The restaurant felt silent. Mama Kemi paused in her cooking, her wooden spoon suspended mid-stir. The few other customers turned to look. In Akwete, respect for elders wasn't just a tradition. It was a law written in the heart of every child. Chief Obinna, however, seemed unperturbed. He finished his meal in silence, paid Mama Kemi with a nod of thanks, and stood to leave. At the door, he turned back to the three young men. When you are ready to learn instead of teach, come find me. I fish from the blue boats at the third pier. But remember, the sea teaches patience to those who are willing to listen, and humility to those who are not. With that, he was gone, leaving behind a tension that the three entrepreneurs didn't quite understand. Typical, Samuel muttered, loud enough for the remaining customers to hear. Old-fashioned thinking holding back progress. But as they left the restaurant, they couldn't shake the feeling that they had just encountered something they weren't prepared for. The old fisherman's words carried a weight that seemed disproportionate to his humble appearance. It was as if he knew something they didn't, something important. They were right to be settled, because Chief Obinna Okafor was indeed keeping a secret so profound that it would eventually turn their world upside down. Over the following weeks, Marcus, David, and Samuel threw themselves into their research with the enthusiasm of men who believed they had found the goose that laid golden eggs. They rented a small house in the village center, set up their laptops and tablets, and began what they called their market penetration strategy. Their days followed a predictable pattern. They would wake late, having stayed up until the early hours discussing profit projections and market scenarios. They would spend their mornings on video calls with potential investors back in Lagos, painting glowing pictures of untapped potential. Their afternoons were devoted to field research, which mostly involved walking around the village, taking notes, and talking to anyone who would listen about their grand plans. The fishermen of Akwete watched them with the patient amusement of people who had seen many changes come and go. Some were curious about the young men's proposals. Others were skeptical. A few were openly hostile to the idea of outsiders disrupting their way of life. But it was Chief Obinna who seemed to fascinate them most. They couldn't understand how someone so obviously intelligent could be so resistant to change. More puzzling still was the respect he commanded in the community. Whenever they mention their plans to modernize the fishing industry, people would nod politely but then suggest they speak with Chief Obinna. Why does everyone keep referring to him as Chief? David asked one evening as they reviewed their notes. Is he some kind of traditional ruler? Marcus had been wondering the same thing. I asked around today. Apparently, he's been fishing here longer than anyone else. Some people say he started when he was just a teenager. Others claim he is the best fisherman on the coast. Samuel laughed. The best fisherman using the worst methods is like being the best horse rider in the age of automobiles. But their dismissive attitude began to crack as they observed Chief Obinna more closely. Every morning, he would arrive at the harbor before dawn, his old truck rumbling to life in the pre-dawn darkness. He would check his nets with the methodical precision of a surgeon, repair any damage with quick, efficient movements, and load his gear with the economy motion that comes from decades of practice. His boat was indeed blue, as he had said, but it was well maintained despite its age. The engine started reliably, the hull was sound, and every piece of equipment had its place. He would sail out with the confidence of a man who knew these waters like the lines on his palm. What puzzled them most was his success. While other fishermen returned with varying catches, some days good, some days poor, Chief Obinna seemed to consistently bring back full nets. His fish were always fresh, always of good quality, and always in demand at the markets. There is something we are missing, Marcus admitted one evening as they watched Chief Obinna return from a particularly successful day. He is doing something different. David had been thinking the same thing. Maybe he knows the best fishing spots, local knowledge, that sort of thing. Or maybe, Samuel suggested with a knowing smile, he is willing to share his secrets for the right price. They decided to make a direct approach. The next morning, they positioned themselves at the harbor early, waiting for Chief Obinna to return from his daily fishing trip. When his blue boat appeared on the horizon, they were ready. Chief Obinna, Marcus called out as the old man secured his boat to the pier. Would like to talk to you about a business proposition. Chief Obinna looked up from his nets, his weathered face showing mild curiosity. What kind of proposition? We want to learn from you, David said, surprising himself with his own humility. You are obviously successful at what you do. Maybe we could work together. The old fisherman studied them for a long moment. Work together how? Samuel stepped forward, his entrepreneur's instincts kicking in. We bring the capital and the business expertise. You bring the local knowledge and the fishing skills. We set up a modern operation that could benefit everyone. And what will this modern operation look like? Chief Obinna asked, his tone neutral. Marcus eagerly outlined their vision. Modern boats with GPS navigation and fish finders, refrigerated storage facilities, direct export channels to international markets, and a processing plant that would handle the increased volume. It sounds impressive, Chief Obinna said when Marcus finished. But tell me, what happens to the other fishermen? The ones who can't afford these modern boats and equipment? The question caught them off guard. They have been so focused on the potential profits that they hadn't considered the human cost of their modernization plans. Well, David said hesitantly, they could work for us. We'll need crew members, processing workers, that sort of thing. So they would go from being independent fishermen to being employees. That is progress, Samuel said, is confidence returning, steady wages, benefits, job security. It is better than the uncertainty of fishing. Chief Obinna nodded slowly, but his expression remained thoughtful. And the traditional fishing methods, the knowledge that has been passed down from generations, obsolete, Marcus said bluntly. Why use a net when you can use sonar? Why guess about fish locations when you can use GPS coordinates of the best spots? I see, Chief Obinna said. And you believe that all the knowledge accumulated over centuries is worthless compared to your machineries. Not worthless, David corrected, just inefficient. Chief Obinna was quiet for a long moment, his eyes scanning the horizon where the sun was settling in a blaze of orange and gold. When he spoke again, his voice carried a sadness that seemed to cut from deep within. You know what I see when I look at you three? I see myself 40 years ago, young, confident, certain that I knew better than everyone else. I came to this village from the city, just like you. I had plans, just like you. I thought I could change everything overnight. The three young men exchanged glances. This wasn't what they had expected. What happened? Marcus asked, despite himself. Chief Obinna smiled, but it was a smile tinged with memory. I learned that the sea doesn't care about your plans. I learned that the fish don't swim according to your schedules. And I learned that people who had been fishing these waters for generations knew things that no book could teach. He paused, his hand still working to secure his net with practiced efficiency. But most importantly, I learned that true wealth isn't measured only in money. It is measured in relationships, in respect, in the ability to sleep peacefully knowing that you have lived with honor. Samuel felt his patience sleeping. That's a nice philosophy, but it doesn't pay the bills. Chief Obinna looked at him with something that might have been pity. Young man, I pay my bills just fine. The question is whether you understand what bills really need to be paid. The conversation was getting nowhere. The three entrepreneurs thanked Chief Obinna for his time and walked away, frustrated by his cryptic responses and seemingly backward thinking. He is hopeless, David muttered as they headed home, completely set in his ways. It is actually sad, Marcus agreed. He could be part of something big, but he is too afraid of change. Samuel was more direct. He is an obstacle. If he won't join us, we'll have to walk around him. But as they walked away, they missed the knowing look in Chief Obinna's eyes. They missed the way he watched them with the patience of a man who had seen this story play out many times before. And they certainly missed the significance of the phone call he made as soon as they were out of earshot. Yes, it's me, he said into his phone, his voice carrying an authority that would have shocked the three young men. They are exactly as I expected, bright, ambitious, and completely clueless about what they are dealing with. Yes, I think it's time to test them properly. Prepare the usual arrangements, but this time, make it convincing. I want to see exactly what they are made of. As the sun set over the fishing village of Akwete, the stage was being set for a confrontation that would teach three young entrepreneurs the most valuable lesson of their lives. But first, they would have to learn it the hard way. The turning point came on a Tuesday morning in the third week of their stay. Marcus, David, and Samuel had spent the previous day meeting with local officials, discussing permits and regulations to their proposed fishing operation. They had been told repeatedly that any major changes to the harbor would require the approval of the fishing community's informal council. And who heads this council? Marcus asked the arid government clerk. Chief Obinna Okafor, came the reply. Nothing happens in the fishing industry here without his say-so. The three men exchanged frustrated glances. It seemed like everywhere they turned, they encountered the same obstacle, the old fisherman who refused to embrace progress. This is ridiculous, Samuel complained as they walked back to their rented house. One stubborn old man can't hold back an entire industry. He is clearly some kind of unofficial power here, David observed. Maybe we need to be more persuasive in our approach. Marcus was already formulating a plan. Tomorrow morning, we confront him directly. No more polite conversation. No more philosophical discussions. We lay out the facts. Either he gets on board with progress or progress moves on without him. They found Chief Obinna at his usual spot the next morning, preparing his nets for the day's fishing. But this time, they weren't alone. Word had spread through the village that the young entrepreneurs were planning something big, and a small crowd of fishermen had gathered to watch. Chief Obinna, Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the harbor. We need to talk. The old fisherman looked up from his work, his weathered hands never pausing in their methodical checking of the nets. Good morning, young men. What can I do for you? You can stop standing in the way of progress, David said bluntly. We've been here for 3 weeks, and everywhere we turn, people tell us we need your approval. Well, we are tired of asking. A murmur went through the crowd of fishermen. This was not how business was conducted in Akwete. Respect for elders, especially for Chief Obinna, was not optional. Chief Obinna set down his nets and faced the three men directly. I see. And what exactly are you proposing? Samuel stepped forward, his chest puffed with artificial confidence. We are going to modernize this place whether you like it or not. We have investors, we have capital, and we have a plan. Your little fishing council can't stop legitimate business development. Is that so? Chief Obinna's voice remained calm, but something in his eyes had changed. And what makes you think you can succeed where others have failed? Because we are not afraid of hard work, Marcus shot back. Because we understand business in a way that your generation never could. Because we are not content to do the same thing forever just because that is how it has always been done. The crowd was growing larger. Fishermen who had been preparing their boats stopped to listen. Women who had been heading to the market paused to watch. Children peeked out from behind their mother's skirts. The entire village seemed to sense that something significant was happening. Chief Obinna nodded slowly. I see. And you believe that your 3 weeks here have taught you everything you need to know about our waters, our fish, our people. We know enough, David said. We know that you are catching fish with methods from the last century. We know that you are selling to local markets when you could be exporting internationally. We know that you are content with small profits when you could be making real money. Real money, Chief Obinna repeated, his tone thoughtful. And what, in your opinion, constitutes real money? Samuel laughed, the sound carrying across the water. More than whatever you are making selling fish to village markets, that's for certain. The insult hung in the air like smoke. In the crowd, Old fishermen shook their heads in disbelief. Young men clenched their fists in anger. Women whispered prayers under their breath. Even the children seemed to understand that something sacred had been violated. But Chief Obinna's reaction was not what everyone expected. Instead of anger, he smiled. It was a sad smile, the kind worn by a teacher watching a student make a mistake that could have been avoided. "Young men," he said, his voice carrying easily across the now silent harbor. "Let me tell you a story. 40 years ago, a young man came to this village. He was from the city, full of big dreams and bigger opinions. He thought he knew everything about business, about success, about what it meant to be a man." The three entrepreneurs shifted uncomfortably. They sensed that Chief Obinna was talking about himself, but they couldn't see where the story was going. This young man looked at the simple fishermen and saw wasted potential. He saw outdated methods and missed opportunities. He was certain that he could change everything, make everyone rich, revolutionize an entire industry. Chief Obinna paused, his eyes scanning faces of the villagers who had gathered to listen. But the young man was impatient. Instead of learning, he demanded to teach. Instead of listening, he insisted on speaking. Instead of respecting the wisdom of those who had come before, he dismissed them as obstacles to progress. Marcus felt his face flushing with anger. "Are you comparing us to yourself? Because we are nothing like..." "You are exactly like I was," Chief Obinna interrupted, his voice carrying a quiet authority that silenced the younger man. "Arrogant, impatient, blind to everything except your own ambition." David stepped forward, his business school training telling him to take control of the narrative. "Look, we didn't come here to trade insults. We came here to offer you an opportunity, a chance to be part of something bigger than your small fishing boat and your village market." "And if I refuse?" Chief Obinna asked. "Then you get left behind," Samuel said harshly. "Simple as that. Business moves forward with or without you. We'll find other fishermen to work with, other sources of fish, other ways to make our plans work." The crowd stirred uneasily. The disrespect was becoming unbearable. Several young fishermen took steps forward, their faces dark with anger, but Chief Obinna raised a hand to stop them. "I understand," he said to the three entrepreneurs. "You've made your position clear. But before you dismiss me entirely, let me make a proposition." Marcus, David, and Samuel exchanged glances. They hadn't expected this. "What kind of proposition?" Marcus asked cautiously. "A test," Chief Obinna said simply. "You believe your modern methods are superior to our traditional ways. Prove it. Take one of our boats. Use whatever equipment you can buy or rent and fish these waters for 1 week. At the end of the week, we'll compare your catch to mine. If you can outfish me using your modern methods, I will support your project publicly. I will help you get whatever approvals you need, and I will encourage other fishermen to work with you." The offer was tempting, but Samuel sensed a trap. "And if we lose, then you admit that perhaps there are things about fishing that can't be learned from books or bought with money. You agree to spend 1 month learning from our fishermen before making any more grand plans for our village." David looked at his partners. It seems like a win-win situation. They were confident in their superior business methods, and modern fishing technology was clearly more advanced than whatever these villagers were using. "It's a deal," Marcus said, extending his hand. Chief Obinna shook it solemnly. "1 week, starting Monday morning. May the best fishermen win." As the crowd dispersed, the three young entrepreneurs felt a surge of excitement. They had been handed the perfect opportunity to demonstrate their superiority. A week of fishing against an old man using outdated methods, it would be like racing a sports car against a bicycle. "This is perfect," David whispered as they walked away. "We'll show them what real fishing looks like." Samuel was already planning their victory celebration. "When we bring in 10 times his catch, we'll have this whole village eating out of our hands." But behind them, Chief Obinna was making another phone call. This one to a number the three young men would never have expected. "It is confirmed," he said into the phone. "They've accepted the challenge. Yes, make sure the Jakarta Dream is fully stocked and ready to go. And contact our buyers in Lagos. I want them to be prepared for a very special delivery next week." These young men are about to learn that wisdom comes in many forms, but humility is the price of admission. As the old fisherman climbed into his truck, a small smile played at the corners of his mouth. The three entrepreneurs had just made the biggest mistakes of their lives, but they wouldn't realize it until it was too late. The stage was set for a showdown that would reveal the true meaning of success, the real value of experience, and the devastating cost of arrogance. But first, Marcus, David, and Samuel had to prepare for what they believed would be the easiest victory of their lives. They had no idea they were about to face the most humbling defeats of their careers. The weekend before their fishing challenge, Marcus, David, and Samuel threw themselves into preparation with the fervor of generals planning a military campaign. Their confidence was absolute. Their strategies seemingly foolproof. They had technology, they had education, and they had the arrogance of youth on their side. First things first, Marcus announced as they gathered around their laptops in their rented house, "We need the best equipment money can buy." David was already pulling up marine supply websites on his tablet. Fish finder with GPS, sonar mapping, temperature gauges, the works. If the fish are out there, we'll find them. Samuel was calculating costs with the enthusiasm of a man spending other people's money. "We'll need a boat too, something with power, with modern navigation systems. None of these paddling around in wooden boats like is the 19th century." They spent Saturday driving to the nearest major port city, their Range Rover loaded with cash and expectations. The marine supply store was a wonderland of modern fishing technology, and they bought everything they could imagine needing: electronic fish finders, GPS navigation systems, professional-grade fishing rods, high-tech lures, and enough equipment to stock a small commercial vessel. The boat was more challenging. Most of the available rental boats were designed for recreational fishing, not the kind of serious operation they had in mind. But money, as always, opened doors. For a substantial deposit, they secured a 30-foot cabin cruiser with 2 engines, radar, and enough electronic equipment to run a small navy. "This is what a real fishing operation looks like," David said with satisfaction as they examined their rented vessel. "When Chief Obinna sees this, he will realize he's been fishing with Stone Age equipment." Sunday was spent learning to operate their equipment. The boat owner, Captain Johnson, spent the day teaching them the basics of navigation, fish finding, and marine safety. He was a professional fisherman himself, and his reaction to their plans was interesting. "You boys are planning to challenge Chief Obinna?" he asked, his eyebrows raised in surprise. "You know him?" Marcus asked. Captain Johnson laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Everyone in the fishing business knows Chief Obinna. He is, well, let's just say he is not someone you want to underestimate." "Why?" Samuel pressed. "What makes him so special?" "Experience," Captain Johnson said simply. "That man has forgotten more about fishing than most of us will ever know. But if you are confident in your abilities," he shrugged, leaving the sentence unfinished. The three entrepreneurs exchanged glances. They were getting tired of everyone treating the old fisherman like some kind of legend. It was time to show the world that modern methods could triumph over traditional wisdom. "We are not worried," David said. "We have the best equipment, the best technology, and the best business minds. That's got to count for something." Captain Johnson nodded politely, but his expression suggested he was already composing condolences in his head. Meanwhile, Chief Obinna was conducting his own preparations, though they looked nothing like the high-tech frenzy of his challengers. He spent Sunday morning as he always did, checking his nets, servicing his boat's engine, and reviewing his equipment with the methodical precision of a craftsman. But there were differences, subtle ones that only the most observant villagers noticed. He made several phone calls, speaking in low tones in languages that not everyone could understand. He spent longer than usual studying weather patterns and tide charts, and he took his boat out for a test run that lasted nearly 4 hours, returning with a thoughtful expression and a notebook full of observations. On Sunday, he did something that surprised everyone. He went to church. Chief Obinna was known to be a spiritual man, but he rarely attended formal services, preferring his own communion with nature and the divine. But this Sunday, he sat in the front pew of the village church, his weathered hands folded in prayer, his lips moving in silent conversation with God. After the service, he spoke with the village pastor, a young man who had known Chief Obinna for years, but had never fully understood the depth of this parishioner's faith or wisdom. "Father," Chief Obinna said, "I want you to pray for 3 young men who are about to learn a very difficult lesson. Pray that they learn it with grace, and that they emerge from their humbling as better men than they entered it." The pastor was puzzled. "What kind of lesson, Chief?" "The kind that can either break a man or make him," Chief Obinna replied. "The kind that teaches the difference between knowledge and wisdom, between information and understanding." That evening, as the sun set over the fishing village of Akwete, 2 very different kinds of preparation were coming to an end. In their rented house, Marcus, David, and Samuel were reviewing their strategy, confident in their superior equipment and methods. At his modest home, Chief Obinna was sitting on his porch, sipping palm wine and watching the stars appear in the darkening sky. To an outsider observer, the contrast couldn't have been starker. The 3 entrepreneurs had spent thousands of dollars on equipment, technology, and expertise. Chief Obinna had spent his weekend in reflection, prayer, and quiet observation. They were preparing for war. He was preparing for wisdom. The village was buzzing with anticipation. Word of the challenge had spread throughout Akwete and beyond. Fishermen from neighboring villages were planning to witness the contest. Bets were being placed, though not in the way the 3 entrepreneurs might have expected. The smart money was on Chief Obinna, but not just because of his reputation. The old-timers remembered other young men who had come to the village with big plans and bigger egos. They remembered how those stories had ended. Mama Kemi, the restaurant owner who had witnessed the first encounter between the parties, was preparing for an influx of visitors. She had ordered extra supplies, hired additional help, and prepared her largest spot for what promised to be the biggest crowd her establishment had ever hosted. "Do you think they have any chance?" she asked her husband as they prepared for the following day. He shook his head sadly. "They don't know what they are dealing with. Chief Obinna isn't just any fisherman. He paused, searching for the right words. He is something special. Those boys are about to learn a lesson they will never forget." As Monday morning approached, the stage was set for a confrontation that would be remembered in Akwete for generations. Three young men with all the advantages of modern technology were about to face off against one old fisherman with nothing but experience, wisdom, and a secret that would change everything. The challenge was simple: 1 week of fishing, with the catch to be measured and compared at the end. But what was really being measured was something far more profound than the weight of fish. It was a test of character, of humility, of the true meaning of success. And as the first light of dawn broke over the fishing village of Akwete, both sides prepared to discover what they were really made of. Monday morning arrived with the kind of perfect weather that made Marcus, David, and Samuel feel like fortune was smiling upon them. The sky was clear, the sea was calm, and their high-tech fishing vessel gleamed in the early morning sunlight like a weapon of war. A crowd had gathered at the harbor to witness the beginning of what everyone knew would be more than just a fishing contest. Villagers who had never shown interest in the daily rhythms of fishing suddenly found reasons to linger at the docks. Children who should have been in school convinced their parents to let them watch history in the making. Even the local pastor had arrived early, though whether he was there to witness triumph or disaster remained unclear. The three entrepreneurs arrived in their Range Rover, dressed in matching fishing outfits that looked like they had been purchased from a catalog. Their boat bobbed impressively at the dock, its array of electronic equipment gleaming in the morning sun. They moved with the confidence of men who believed they were about to make history. Chief Obinna arrived early in his old truck, wearing the same faded clothes he wore every day. His blue boat sat modestly beside their gleaming vessel, looking almost embarrassed by the comparison, but those who knew him noticed something different in his demeanor, a quiet intensity that hadn't been there before. "Gentlemen," announced the village head, who had agreed to serve as an official witness to the challenge. "The rules are simple. 7 days of fishing, starting now and ending next Monday at sunset. All fish caught must be brought to the harbor for weighing and verification. The fisherman or team with the largest total catch wins." Marcus stepped forward, his chest puffed with confidence. "Before we begin, Chief Obinna, I want to give you one last chance to reconsider. Our equipment alone costs more than most people here make in a year. It's not too late to avoid embarrassment." The crowd murmured at this display of arrogance. Several young fishermen took angry steps forward, but Chief Obinna raised a calming hand. "Young man," he said, his voice carrying clearly across the water, "I appreciate your concern, but I've been fishing these waters since before you were born. I think I'll manage." David laughed, the sound echoing off the water. Fishing with what? That ancient boat and those patch nets? This isn't going to be a contest. It's going to be a massacre. We shall see, Chief Obinna replied simply. At exactly 6 a.m., both boats pushed off from the harbor. The contrast was striking. The entrepreneur's vessel roared to life with the sound of powerful engines, while Chief Emeka's boat pottered away with the steady rhythm of a well-maintained but modest motor. The first day set the tone for what everyone expected would be a one-sided contest. Marcus, David, and Samuel spent the morning marveling at their fish finder, which painted detailed pictures of the ocean floor and highlighted schools of fish with electronic precision. They had GPS coordinates for the best fishing spots, purchased from commercial fishing databases. Their equipment told them everything: water temperature, depth, current speed, and fish density. This is incredible, Samuel shouted over the sound of their engines as they raced toward their first target location. Look at this screen. There is a massive school of fish just 2 miles northeast of here. They reached the coordinates and deployed their lines with the enthusiasm of hunters who had spotted their prey. Their rods were top of the line. Their lures were scientifically designed to attract specific species, and their reels could handle fish that weighed hundreds of pounds. For the first hour, everything went according to plan. They caught fish with the regularity of a factory production line, their modern equipment making the progress seem almost too easy. By noon, they had filled 2 large coolers with their catch. At this rate, Marcus calculated aloud, we'll have enough fish to feed the entire village by the end of the week. Meanwhile, Chief Emeka had disappeared from the horizon in his small blue boat, moving at a pace that seemed almost leisurely compared to their high-speed approach. Those watching from the shore lost sight of him within the first hour and didn't see him again until late afternoon. When both boats returned to harbor that evening, the entrepreneurs were jubilant. Their catch was impressive by any standard. Nearly 200 pounds of various fish species, all fresh and all of good quality. They had documented everything with photographs and GPS coordinates, already planning their strategy for the following day. Chief Obinna returned an hour later, his boat riding lower in the water than usual, but when he pulled up to the dock, something unexpected happened. Instead of unloading his catch, immediately he made a phone call. Within minutes, a large refrigerated truck arrived at the harbor. Not the kind of small pickup truck that usually collected fish from local fishermen, but a serious commercial vehicle with professional cooling systems and scales certified for export. The crowd watched in growing amazement as Chief Obinna's modest boat disgorged fish after fish. But these weren't just any fish. They were premium specimens, the kind that commanded top prices in international markets. Red snapper, grouper, yellowfin tuna, and species that many of the local fishermen had never seen before. When the weighing was complete, Chief Obinna's catch totaled 450 pounds, more than double what the 3 entrepreneurs had managed with all their modern equipment. That's impossible, David whispered, staring at the scales in disbelief. It must be some kind of trick, Samuel added. Maybe he had fish stored somewhere else, brought them in separately. But the village head had been watching carefully, and several other fishermen had volunteered as independent witnesses. There was no doubt about the legitimacy of Chief Obinna's catch. Marcus felt his confidence wavering for the first time. How did you do it? He asked, his voice no longer carrying his earlier arrogance. Chief Obinna looked at him with something that might have been pity. "I fished," he said simply. "Your equipment showed you where fish had been," Chief Obinna corrected gently. "The sea is not a warehouse, young man. It's a living thing, always changing, always moving. Your machines can tell you many things, but they cannot tell you how to think like a fish." The crowd began to disperse, but the buzzing of conversation continued long into the night. The first day had not gone as anyone expected, except perhaps for Chief Obinna himself. The second day brought clouds and rougher seas, conditions that would test both modern technology and traditional wisdom. The entrepreneurs, stung by their unexpected defeat, had spent the previous evening recalibrating their equipment and studying new fishing databases they had purchased online. Yesterday was a fluke, Marcus insisted as they prepared their boat. Beginner's luck, or maybe he got lucky with his fishing spots. Today, we will show what consistent, scientific fishing can accomplish. Their confidence was bolstered by their investments in even more advanced equipment. They had purchased underwater cameras, additional fish finders, and weather monitoring devices that could predict fish behavior based on barometric pressure and water conditions. Chief Obinna, meanwhile, spent his money as he always did, checking his nets, studying the sky, and having quiet conversations with other fishermen. But again, those who knew him well noticed subtle differences. He spent longer examining his equipment, made more phone calls, and seemed to be coordinating something larger than a simple fishing trip. The second day's result was even more shocking than the first. Despite the additional equipment and refined strategy, the entrepreneurs managed only 130 pounds of fish. The rougher conditions had made their high-speed approach more difficult, and their electronic equipment had given them conflicting readings in the choppy water. Chief Obinna returned with 620 pounds of fish, including several species that were so rare they had to be specially documented for the local fisheries department. By the third day, word of the contest had spread far beyond Akwete. Fishermen from neighboring villages were arriving to witness what was becoming less of a competition and more of a demonstration. Marine biologists from the university showed up to study Chief Obinna's catches, amazed by the variety and quality of fish he was bringing in. The entrepreneurs were becoming desperate. Their modern methods, which had seemed so obviously superior, were being systematically defeated by an old man in a boat that looked like it belonged in a museum. "There is something we are not seeing," David said on the fourth morning. His earlier confidence completely evaporated. "No one is this good at fishing. It is not humanly possible." Samuel was more direct. "He is cheating somehow. Maybe he is buying fish from commercial boats and passing them off as his own." But Marcus was beginning to suspect something else entirely. What if he is not just a simple fisherman? The thought was too disturbing to contemplate fully. It would mean that everything they believed about their own superiority was false. It would mean that they had been arrogant fools, mocking someone who was far beyond their understanding. On the fourth day, Chief Obinna's catch exceeded 700 pounds. The refrigerated truck that arrived to collect his fish was larger than before, and the men who operated it treated him with a deference that seemed disproportionate to his humble appearance. "Chief," one of the truck operators said, speaking in English with a slight foreign accent, The buyers in Lagos are asking if you can increase the volume for next week's shipment to Singapore. The restaurants there can't get enough of your premium catches. The three entrepreneurs standing nearby felt their world tilt on its axis. Singapore, premium shipment. This wasn't the conversation of a small-time village fisherman. That evening, they confronted Chief Obinna directly. "Who are you really?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Chief Obinna looked at them for a long moment, his weathered face showing the accumulated wisdom of decades. "I am exactly who I have always said I was. I am a fisherman." "Fishermen don't ship to Singapore," David protested. "Some do," Chief Obinna said. "The question is not who I am, but who you thought I was and why you thought it." By the sixth day, the three entrepreneurs were broken men. Their total catch for the week was less than Chief Obinna brought in on any single day. The expensive equipment had proven worthless against conditions they didn't understand, waters they couldn't read, and fish that seemed to avoid their scientifically designed lures. But it was on the sixth day that the truth finally began to emerge, not through Chief Obinna's revelation, but through their own investigation. Samuel, desperate to understand how they were being so thoroughly defeated, had spent the evening questioning other fishermen. Most were reluctant to talk, but eventually, an old man who had been drinking palm wine became more talkative. "You really don't know, do you?" The old fisherman laughed. "You've been challenging the owner of Okafor Marine Exports, the largest seafood export company in West Africa. Chief Obinna doesn't just fish. He owns the entire supply chain from here to Europe and Asia." Samuel felt his knees go weak. "That is impossible. He drives an old truck, wears simple clothes, lives in a modest house. Rich men don't forget where they come from." "Rich men who forget where they come from don't last long," the old fisherman replied. "Chief Obinna remembers that he started with nothing but a small boat and a willingness to learn. He never stopped being a fisherman, even after he became a millionaire." The revelation hit Samuel like a physical blow. He stumbled back to their rented house, where he found Marcus and David planning their strategy for the final day. "We need to talk," he said, his voice hollow. When he told them what he had learned, the silence stretched for nearly 5 minutes. Everything they had believed about themselves, about their situation, about their victim, crumbled into dust. "How much is he worth?" David finally asked. Samuel had asked the same question. "No one knows exactly, but the old man said his company handles millions of dollars in exports every year. He owns processing plants, refrigerated ships, distribution networks across 3 continents." Marcus put his head in his hands. "We've been mocking a millionaire. We've been trying to teach business to someone who built an empire while we were still in diapers." The scope of their humiliation was just beginning to sink in. Every condescending word, every arrogant assumption, every dismissive gesture had been directed at a man who was more successful than they could ever hope to be. "But why?" David asked. "Why did he let us humiliate ourselves? Why didn't he just tell us who he was?" It was Marcus who understood first. "Because he was teaching us. This whole week, this whole challenge, it was never about fishing. It was about humility. The 7th and final day dawned grey and overcast, matching the mood of the 3 entrepreneurs. They went through the motions of preparing their boats, but their hearts were no longer in the competition. They had been so thoroughly defeated that the final day felt like a formality. Chief Obinna has always prepared his boats with the same methodical care he had shown every day. But this time, he did something different. He invited the village head and several other respected members of the community to join him on his boat. Today, he announced to the crowd that had gathered, "These young men will see exactly what they have been challenging." The entrepreneur's boat followed Chief Emeka at a distance, the expensive fish finders and GPS systems now seeming like toys in the hands of children. They watched as his boat moved with purpose to locations that didn't appear on any of the electronic charts. But what they saw next would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Chief Emeka's boat was met by other vessels, not fishing boats, but commercial ships flying flags from different countries. They watched as his modest daily catch was supplemented by fish that had been caught by professional crews using his methods, his knowledge, and his contracts. They realized that what they had been witnessing wasn't just one man's fishing ability, but the operation of a sophisticated international business that Chief Obinna had built over 40 years of patient work. The final tally was devastating. For the entire week, Marcus, David, and Samuel had caught a total of 840 pounds of fish. Chief Obinna's operation had brought in over 4,000 pounds of premium seafood destined for restaurants and markets around the world. But the numbers were just the beginning of their education. That evening, as the village celebrated what everyone understood had been more than just a fishing contest, Chief Obinna approached the three young men. They were sitting by themselves, staring out at the water, their dreams of easy conquest dissolved into bitter reality. "May I join you?" he asked. They nodded, too ashamed to speak. Chief Obinna sat down beside them, his weathered hands folded in his lap. For a long time, no one said anything. The sound of the celebration echoed across the water, but it felt like it was happening in another world. Finally, Marcus found his voice. "Why didn't you tell us?" "Would you have listened?" Chief Obinna asked gently. 3 weeks ago, when you first arrived, would you have believed that the old fisherman in simple clothes was someone you could learn from? The question hung in the air like an accusation because they all knew the answer. "We were arrogant," David admitted. "We thought we knew everything." "You thought you knew business," Chief Obinna corrected. "But business is just a tool. What you didn't know was wisdom. You didn't know respect. You didn't know humility." Samuel, who had been the most defensive of the three, felt tears burning his eyes. "We made fools of ourselves." "No," Chief Obinna said, his voice carrying surprising gentleness. "You made mistakes. There is a difference. Fools repeat their mistakes. Wise men learn from them." He stood up, brushing sand from his pants. "I want to tell you something that I hope you will remember for the rest of your lives. 40 years ago, I was exactly like you, young, ambitious, certain that I knew better than everyone around me. I came to this village planning to revolutionize the fishing industry." The three men looked at him in surprise. "The difference was that I had good teachers who were patient enough to show me my mistakes before I made them publicly. They taught me that true success isn't about proving you are superior to others. It's about lifting others up with you." He paused, looking out at the water where the lights of fishing boats dotted the horizon like stars. My company employs over 3,000 people across 7 countries. Every one of those jobs exists because I learned to listen instead of lecture, to respect instead of dismiss, to serve instead of dominate. Marcus felt something shift inside his chest, a recognition that everything he thought he knew about success was wrong. What should we do now? He asked. Chief Obinna smiled, and for the first time since they had met him, it was a smile of genuine warmth. Now you learn. If you're willing to stay, to really stay, not as investors or modernizers or teachers, but as students, I will show you what 40 years of patience can build. The three young men faced a choice that would define the rest of their lives. They could return to Lagos, lick their wounds and try to forget their humiliation, or they could stay and learn from a master who had just offered them the greatest gift of their lives, genuine wisdom. The decision wasn't easy. Their egos were bruised, their confidence shattered, their assumptions about success completely overturned. But somewhere in the depths of their humiliation, they found something they hadn't expected: hunger, not for easy victory, but for real understanding. We'll stay, Marcus said, speaking for all three of them. But we don't know how to be students. We've only ever tried to be teachers. Chief Obinna's laugh was rich with understanding. Then, that is the first thing you will learn: how to listen, how to observe, how to respect the knowledge that others have earned through experience. The transformation didn't happen overnight. For weeks, the three men struggled with their new roles. They had to unlearn the arrogance that had defined their approach to business. They had to accept that their expensive education meant nothing without wisdom to guide it. They had to discover that true confidence came not from dominating others, but from understanding their own limitations. Chief Obinna became more than a teacher. He became a father figure, patiently guiding them through lessons that couldn't be found in any business school. He showed them how relationships were more valuable than contracts, how reputation was more important than profit margins, how serving others was the foundation of lasting success. Slowly, gradually, they began to understand the true scope of what Chief Obinna had built. Okafor Marine Exports wasn't just a fishing company. It was a network of relationships that spanned continents. It was built on trust earned over decades, on quality maintained through countless small decisions, on a reputation that opened doors money couldn't touch. Business, Chief Obinna told them one evening as they sat on his porch watching the sunset, is not about what you can take from the world. It's about what you can give to it. When you focus on service, on quality, on relationships, profit becomes a natural result, not a desperate pursuit. Marcus, David, and Samuel spent 6 months in Akwete, learning not just about the fishing industry but about life itself. They learned that true wealth was measured not just in money but in respect, relationships, and the ability to sleep peacefully knowing you had lived with honor. When they finally returned to Lagos, they were different men. The arrogance was gone, replaced by confidence built on genuine competence. The dismissive attitude toward traditional methods was replaced by respect for wisdom earned through experience. The hunger for quick success was replaced by patience for sustainable growth. 5 years later, Marcus, David, and Samuel had built their own company. Not the exploitative operation they had originally planned, but a business based on the principles Chief Obinna had taught them. They partnered with traditional fishermen instead of replacing them. They invested in communities instead of extracting from them. And they built relationships instead of just pursuing profits. Their company became successful, but more importantly, it became respected. They employed hundreds of people, supported dozens of fishing communities, and created sustainable prosperity that lifted everyone involved. Chief Obinna watched their progress with the satisfaction of a teacher who had seen his students surpass even his own expectations. He never took credit for their transformation, but everyone who knew the story understood that he had taken three arrogant young men and turned them into wise leaders. The old fisherman continued to fish his waters, continued to operate his export business, and continued to teach anyone humble enough to learn. His blue boat still pottered out of Akwete Harbor every morning, and he still returned every evening with his catch. But now, when young entrepreneurs came to the village with big plans and bigger egos, the story of Marcus, David, and Samuel served as both warning and inspiration. It reminded everyone that wisdom often comes disguised as simplicity, that true teachers are often found in unexpected places, and that the greatest victories are won not just through domination but through transformation. And Chief Obinna, he continued to live modestly, dress simply, and treat everyone with the respect he had learned was the foundation of all true success. His wealth was measured not just in millions of dollars, but in the lives he had changed, the communities he had lifted, and the legacy of wisdom he had passed on to a new generation. The old fisherman had taught his greatest lesson not through words, but through example, that true power lies not in proving your superiority over others, but in helping others discover their own potential for greatness. This story reminds us that wisdom often wears humble clothes, that true teachers are found in unexpected places, and that the greatest victories come not from defeating others, but from conquering our own arrogance and pride. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell for more inspiring stories.